these cuts and how strong they are and the amount of studios that they're pushing back out, was this really aggressive acquisition policy flawed? Welcome to the Weekly Download, the definitive weekly podcast on the video games industry. Hello. New
Hello,
listeners.
I'm Alex. I've already done my bit.
I was going to say, hello everybody. Welcome to the Weekly Download, the weekly speed run through the biggest stories in the games industry, brought to you by Big Games Machine. Alex has got a new background for any returning viewers, any returning listeners. Alex has got a new background. Any new listeners or viewers, if you don't know, Alex has got a new background. I don't have a new background. I think now we've done the housekeeping.
Possibly the biggest week in video game news of the year, and we kicked it off with backgrounds. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah, but you're being so impatient. I was enjoying hashtag background chat, but we can talk about the biggest, two very big stories. We normally
especially having missed last week, right? Because that's impacting this week's story as well.
Yes, there's some two very big stories, very different subject matter, but we're looking at Sony, we're looking at Xbox, and we're looking at Sony's decision to end production of discs by January 2028, and then not the flip side, but we know Microsoft also very keen on a more digital future, where Game Pass, they're very much less on the physical train, just like Sony now. But with Game Pass, with Xbox, we'll be looking at the big news that a lot of layoffs at Xbox, starting this week, running through to the end of the 2027 financial year. As a part of that, we're also seeing divestment in a few studios. So Xbox taking the decision, hey, we're doing layoffs, but we want to make sure we give these studios a chance. But yeah, that's the top line for today's episode. Alex, do you have anything to share before we get started?
Not beforehand. I think there's a lot in there, and I think the PlayStation news, when we get to it, had so many other things that kind of happen alongside it. And I don't know whether they were going to happen anyway or if people saw the opportunity. But it was a really wild week for digital, so excited to get in.
Yeah, I think what we'll do then, we will get straight into it. We'll start by looking at this news around PlayStation. So if you are interested in video games but you've not seen this, A, where have you been? And B, let's tell you what's going on. So as I was saying before, Sony has announced last week that it's no longer going to be producing physical discs for new games released on PlayStation consoles by January 2028. After this point, new games will only be available in digital formats on the PlayStation Store and at retail stores. I imagine brick and mortar stores, as well as your Amazons, your online retailers. One last piece of context, I think, to add before we do talk about this: there's no impact on any games launching before then. Your physical library will work. There's nothing going on where Sony are going to cut those kind of things. But I think from the PlayStation perspective, this is a natural direction to the drastic increase. And we've spoken about this on the podcast, Alex, the big increase we've seen in physical versus digital, the number of digital sales continuing to eclipse physical. So, I don't know if we're starting this with a question, but does this make sense? From a Sony perspective, is it a response to
from a
consumer
Sony perspective?
Trends?
From a Sony perspective and from a consumer trend perspective, actually, yes, it makes sense. But I just think that I think a lot of the key evangelists and kind of truly passionate people still have either a massive affinity for physical games, like in one shape or form, or that they remain collectors and do still purchase things physically. I mean, we know like Limited Run and similar kind of physical media out there that are producing indie titles that have blown up. And I'm not sure if they're going to be ultimately impacted, because they're obviously not made by Sony. I don't know if that's going to be a kind of like the license will still be out there to continue to make.
Yeah, where would they source the discs from if there's a
we know they're going to continue. We know Sony's going to continue to allow people to create discs for games released before that date. The question is if it's then going to be forced on them on anything launching after that date. Does it become an impossibility if they manage to source?
Yeah, outside. That's a good question. I think there is so many questions like that, isn't there? We are still 18 months away from when this is supposed to be happening, but there is a lot of questions. I think so far, and for context, we're recording this on Wednesday, the 8th of July. The episode will be live on Friday the 10th. Since this was announced, and I think this is interesting if we're looking at, we're speaking about consumer trends. Since this was announced last week, today, the 8th of July, is the first time Sony have posted on their social platforms in 5 or 6 days at this point. And we've already seen, I think, 17 million views on the post, which is nothing to do with the conversation. It's about a control stick. 17 million views, nearly 60,000 replies as of the time of recording. And it's the same on YouTube. People posting comments on YouTube videos that Sony have uploaded. And I don't need to tell you what the comments are. These comments are very much, there's a lot of anger. There's a lot of demand for physical games. But then I'd be saying, where was everyone when these games were still available to buy physically and everyone was buying them digitally? It feels a bit performative to
They're
me.
still there, and I'm massively conflicted. Firstly, is it the noises, people being noisy, which is always the case here, and obviously it's a massive change, and I don't think Sony are going to change it at all. Like that, I just don't think that's on the cards. I don't think any amount of groundswell is going to change that. I don't think this is an Xbox One kind of situation. I think the world has moved on to even Xbox is very much the same boat. That this is going to be their there you go, you can do it now moment, because obviously Xbox were the people pushing for this before anybody else.
Yeah. I mean, interesting.
I think
there's a change.org petition that has 212,000 signatures at the moment.
I'm sure they'll get them, but ultimately, I mean, the business case likely isn't there, and I guess the train continues on its downward course. Arguably, I guess if people go out and put an absolute fortune into buying all the physical discs and having some kind of strange, this is what we're doing, maybe there'd be a change there. But GTA just announced that they're going to put a code in the box. Another thing that well, there we go. If that's allowed, then biggest game in the world is doing it. Then I guess it gives us the allowance as well. The Hall Pass, I think that's the one.
We can only speculate on this. Do you think there's anything in that in terms of Sony saw, maybe this is something Sony have been thinking about for a while? They saw Rockstar go ahead and announce that they were doing it, and that might have pushed them to announce it now rather than perhaps later down the line, because yes, there's been backlash, but I imagine from some of the data Rockstar have seen in terms of pre-orders, they could probably say, this hasn't changed anything.
Yeah, no, and I imagine ultimately there was some kind of level of discussion about it. PlayStation, I'm not imagining this. PlayStation and Take-Two have a deal around kind of promotion.
Yeah, they have. They're doing the GTA 6 best on PlayStation this time around.
Exactly. So we're just in a place where it's like, okay, this is happening, and so they will have known that was there. And I don't know if they would have sat there being like, do we hit fire on this? Let's see what the reaction is. Or if it was just always going to happen. I believe the two are connected, but whether one gave the green light to the other, or whether they were always just together as kind of like covering fire for each other, I don't know. But I can't imagine that deal went down without both of them being made aware of what was happening.
It's like, guys, I thought you were going to make all our discs for us.
Yeah. But I think where I kind of sit on it ultimately, I mean, it's obviously going to impact the top collectors, and it does remove one place where deals could come up, because ultimately, digital is a lot more control. This is going to give Sony a lot more control, and I'm sure that's going to be part of the reason I'm doing this, because box retailers have an incentive to clear inventory space for the next thing. So if something isn't proving as popular, it's naturally pushed down in price to get it out the door. As I remember with BMX Triple X when I worked at GameSpot, they got into, we had so many copies of that.
Please.
So let's get it out of here.
Free with every purchase. I don't want it. You've got to take it.
It can't be, because it's an 18, so you couldn't even do that. 18, 16,
free with some purchases.
Yeah.
That's a good point, though, about so one of the things in this announcement was that it's not just going to be, hey, you can only get games on the PlayStation Store. There will still be those retail listings. There will still be ways to get games outside of the PlayStation Store ecosystem, but then when those ways amount to a code that you have to input on the PlayStation Store, the alarm bells to me ring in terms of Sony and PlayStation have a massive monopoly here, surely. And that's something where I do wonder, is there I'm not a legal expert, is there some degree of a legal basis where someone will be able to turn around and challenge this on the grounds of, because we've seen it with Steam, and we've seen it with Valve in the last year,
and
where,
iOS.
yeah, where there's a case to say, removing the ability to sell physical games, like you're saying, at heavy discounts at retail, sell games secondhand to people, because that completely, it's the death of the secondhand market on PlayStation. So
Yeah,
do we have a monopoly situation here where Sony will be able to dictate exactly when games go on sale? They'll be able to dictate exactly what their first party catalog is worth. We've seen with Nintendo don't do sales. They barely do sales on physical products. Are we going to see that kind of thing again, where we don't see these big discounts on first party games because they don't have to compete with anyone, really?
this goes right the way back to the deal was always, and I think I've said this before on the podcast, but the deal was always, oh, we won't have to distribute, we don't have to manufacture, we don't have to send it to the country, it's going to allow us to bring the price down. We haven't seen that. Like the price of games, Nintendo kind of have with their kind of cheap one between physical and digital.
We could see Sony go down the same route that Nintendo have gone down with. I think Nintendo has spoken very recently as well about the dynamic price, not in terms of going up or down, but them setting prices quite dynamically based on the games is a tactic they're going to use a lot going forward. And we've seen it with Star Fox, we've seen it with the new Splatoon. So maybe there is an opportunity here where, by having all of that control, Sony throw players a bone once in a while. But to argue with myself, I can't see that happening, because I feel like Sony sell most of their games as very premium, expensive experiences in a way that Nintendo are showing themselves to not do.
PlayStation do what Nintendo don't, to quote an old,
bring that back,
to quote the old Sega. Yeah, no, I think we're at risk of jumping around a lot here, because I think there's also an argument, as I jumps around again, of like, when I was a kid, trading things in so I could buy, both trading with friends so we could, between us play 2 games, or trading things in so I can get the latest, greatest game. And those things are kind of being removed from people's tool set to get in and play more games, which is sad. But at the same time,
that's an affordability problem.
Yeah, but at the same time, is it the younger audience that's making the switch to digital even more reactively?
Sean Connery coming out then.
Yeah. He was a massive PlayStation fan.
Yeah, he famously was a big collector, I believe, of PS4
full limited run set. Yeah.
That's a good point, though. That is a good point, and that to me, it comes back to the point that clearly this is a consumer-driven trend. Like, I know we've spoke before about, you used to be you had a big physical collection. Now you tend to be quite digital.
I don't have a disc drive, and I rarely, if ever, buy physical things from the Switch.
Yeah, it's sadly a reality of where things are going. I do want to touch on, before we move on to Xbox, not that we need to do that quickly, but I think this is something that you'll speak on, and it might have been what you were hinting about before, the fact that this announcement came alongside the news in the same day, maybe even the same hour, that PS3 and Vita shops, storefronts even, are both closing down.
Yeah, by mid next year.
Yeah, and obviously we do what we do for a job. The PR metric, the PR like overview of saying, hey, we're not making physical discs anymore. Also, by the way, we're shutting those stores down soon, so you won't be able to access them. And by the way, this will definitely happen with the PS5 in the future. It will, when it's not useful for us anymore. It feels like, why did you have to announce those at the same time? Or was it a case of getting all the really bad news out there? But I feel like the reaction would have been better if they hadn't given a very good example of why physical media is so important, immediately after saying, hey, we ain't doing physical media anymore.
I mean, and I think a lot of people have made this point. I mean, ultimately, those day one decision, those the updates you get day one for discs you bought often render what you're getting on the disc irrelevant anyway. So even having that day one disc, I mean, what was it Medal of Honor Warfighter? I think the disc that arrived, and Ninja Gaiden back on the Xbox, the first one, or was it three? One of them. Both of them were unfinishable. One of them was unplayable without day one patches or without early patches. So ultimately, closing down the store, if that's taking offline all the updates and everything that comes with it, is essentially the same whether
Kills
you've got a
the
physical disc or digital version. So there's a question there as to like the deal was made the moment we agreed to DLC was okay, that you could ship something that had a bug or was feature incomplete. That was always going to make it impossible the moment you closed the server. But yes, PR wise, it's a
not a great move.
screaming own. I mean, it probably isn't a screaming own goal. They probably did the calculations like much like everything else, much like as we're about to discuss in a minute, Xbox pulling the band-aid off and telling people all the things that are going to happen at once
It
makes
feels
more sense than doing it over time.
this is quite like a UK centric point to make, but I think you'll understand what I mean by this. It feels like there's a big thing with the UK Parliament where before they break for the summer, they push through a load of unpopular bills or new laws because under the logic of, hey, let's just get it all done now. We can go away and people will forget about it by the time we come back. And I know this isn't the exact same thing, but it does feel quite like,
It's
let's just shove all the bad news out. We won't tweet for a bit. Everyone can get angry. Everyone can, all the journalists can write their articles. Everyone on Reddit can talk about how despite they haven't bought a disc for the PS5 in 4 years, they're really angry about this. And then we'll come back in a few weeks and just be like, so what did we miss? We're all
yeah,
happy again now.
especially before the Independence Day long holiday that everybody took. Obviously, like they put it out just
Yeah,
before. In
yeah.
fact, did they put it out on the third? Did it go out the day of?
It was either
Everybody
the
being
it was either the third or the second,
yeah, I
I
can't remember which
think.
it was, and it does kind of make a difference. Yeah, I mean, and that's across the board. I mean, there's a great episode, one of my old favorite shows, The West Wing, where CJ, the press secretary, is like, I think he'll put it out with the trash day or bin. Yeah, it must be trash. They're not going to call it bin day, talking of being really British. But it's like, and the crux of it, yeah, they're all stories today. We put it all in, we just
Yeah, to
kind of
get
like
it all
bundle
out.
everything together and chuck it out, and then hopefully nobody notices. And sometimes
Yeah,
people
but we've
do, and
noticed.
sometimes they're all
I think a lot
stories.
of people have noticed.
It was hard not to, I think.
But I think we'll wrap here to move on to Xbox. I think maybe just a rhetorical question for you, for
Hmm.
anyone listening.
No, I
Would
do
you
have
like
one other
to
because
go
I,
for it? Go for it.
I had the joy of putting together one of the newsletters while you were out recently. And off the back of this, there was also a video game history foundation that are
Oh,
also
maybe
trying to
don't
appeal
talk
for.
about that just yet. Maybe don't talk about that just yet because we might come back to that later.
Okay, I will be quiet.
We'll be quiet. We'll wrap there with Alex. Alex clearly hasn't read all of today's plan because
Sorry.
there's a certain story that might be popping up at the end of the
Fair
episode.
enough. Perfect.
But
Well, I'll
no,
let you conclude your thought then.
yeah, I think mine was a rhetorical question. We're about to speak about Xbox. We've already seen Nintendo go for the game key cards as a potential solution to this. Obviously, there's benefits that you can resell those, which now feels like amazing in comparison to what this could look like. I think, yeah, my question for anyone listening is, who do we think will be next? And I think we'll come on to Xbox in a moment. And I imagine this is probably something that came out and was celebrated, I imagine, within Xbox, because I think, as you've alluded to earlier in this conversation, Alex, I imagine Xbox were there thinking, we've kind of been quietly doing that. I still find it funny that Indiana Jones on Switch 2 is the only version to be complete in physical form. All the others are just codes in a box, I believe. So yeah, I think will Xbox do this quite soon, I imagine so.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we'll move on to speaking about Xbox now.
And And as we do, and referring back to the bin day, this news, it came out on Monday.
Xbox, yes,
Yeah, I
Monday.
think they were very keen to tackle this just after I sent a newsletter, as I recall, which is like, Mr. Biggie. Brilliant.
Thanks a
Thanks,
lot,
Xbox.
Asher Sharma. Thanks. You could have
Yeah,
waited.
because we're the ones that have been impacted. I
Yeah.
will say it definitely indicated that they were aware of how big this would be and were prepared to take it on. I think,
Yeah,
and it's,
this
I
Xbox
think it's going to
news.
fall. Yeah, I think it's going to
Yeah.
fall throughout. They're very aware of what they're doing, and they want to tackle.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Let's look at what they're doing because
Exactly.
this is big. Xbox is cutting 3,200 roles throughout its studios, its publishing, all these things by the end of the next financial year. 1,600 of those will be laid off immediately, or in the very near foreseeable future. On top of that, Xbox is also divesting from studios it's acquired on this big, long acquisition spree that we've seen in the past 5 or 6 years. We'll talk about that, but we're looking at Compulsion Games and Double Fine Productions, both being cut loose. They're going to become independent again. They've got their IP in the catalogs there, which I think is a really good gesture. Hellblade developer Ninja Theory and State of Decay developer Undead Labs have both entered terms to have new ownership and funding to complete Senua and State of Decay 3. Don't have the details on who those new owners are, but those 4 studios that we're seeing leave the Xbox gaming umbrella. And then one last point before we open up and have this conversation is, and one that really, doesn't necessarily upset me, but I do find this one really sad, is a lot of roles as part of these layoffs are going to be lost at id Software. I think if you're in the industry and you've been around for even a little bit of time, we're all aware of how not just important id Software are now, but how foundational they have been to get in the industry to where it is now. And so that's a really sad one. And a lot of those departures are reportedly in QA and in the tech side of things as well. So I know we were speaking about this, Alex. It's a question of what will happen to the engine, which is, it's a great engine. It's what Doom's built on. But that's the overview. Alex, please
Yeah, I
share
mean they've
some.
been. I mean, for id they've been kind of. I think we were looking the other day. They were founded in like '91 and pioneered the first-person shooter genre with Wolfenstein and then Doom, and like continue to make incredible engines from the Rage engine up to, I don't know if it's called the Doom engine, but whatever they're running on now, and then the Quake engine. Like they have done incredible things, and to think that that tech is going, and that the Doom franchise remains one of the pillars that Xbox say they're going to continue to lean on. But yeah, what does that look like when it loses that freshness? Because every time, you'd have had this kind of habit of reinventing themselves with entirely new engines to make incredible games. If that's going to go, then are they just going to become another, not another Call of Duty studio? That's not quite what I
Another
mean. But
support studio.
no, more are they just going to be on a treadmill of churning out content games? I don't
Well,
know what that
maybe, but
means.
then yeah,
Games as content rather than
if
innovate.
there's so much here to talk about, so I don't just want to sit
Oh
and
yeah,
talk about id. But no,
yeah,
I
no.
think id is the biggest one to me because we can look at South, Compulsion Games, South of Midnight, critically did well, commercially did poorly. Double Fine, Psychonauts 2, they've released a couple of games since then, but Psychonauts 2 was really the last big success they've had. So again, they've had commercial struggles.
And
Hellblade, I think
huge,
the follow-up to...
huge kind of indie darlings. Kiln kind of blew up when they announced
Yeah,
that.
but
There was
just on the
all sorts of stuff. But
commercial
yeah, but they
side,
don't sell or they don't get
yeah,
downloaded, I suppose, because they're part of Game Pass.
so I kind of, and then if we look at Ninja Theory, Hellblade, the follow-up to that, I think really struggled commercially despite launching on all platforms. State of Decay 3, I believe that was announced in 2020 and they had to re-announce it this year.
Yeah. I think that's right.
So I look at those 4 studios and I think, not to be cold, but it makes sense that this is Microsoft looking, and Xbox looking and thinking, if we're focusing on our core franchises, we don't have a place for this big list of studios that will put all the games on Game Pass, and we'll have this big network of teams that make small games and big games. So they all make sense to me in terms of, yeah, we need to get rid of these studios. Let's push them back out. They can go on their own way. They can find their own path, but it's just not with Xbox. But that's why the id stuff really confuses me, because surely everything that they're doing is it is commercially working. I believe this week they've just launched a DLC for Doom, the Dark Ages. So they're still actively working on stuff. As you said, in the Doom franchise, which is reportedly one of the big pillars that they're going to base the business around. So that's the one that I just can't really wrap my head around.
We also don't know the scale of it. And, there's two sides. One, we don't know if that's their entire engineering team or if they're cutting it back to something leaner for some reason. But yeah, I mean, if they're losing, I understand losing QA because they can probably internalize that into another studio and like have an Xbox QA, and that's just going to be what that is.
Yeah, that just feels like a consequence of, because I think we saw it a lot with Activision when that came into Xbox, and it was like, right, as you've said, there's a lot of roles here which they're not specialized. Xbox will have teams that do QA, so their studios don't need those teams.
Exactly. Although all of this kind of falls under the Bethesda umbrella still, and they're going to need QA if they want to get Skyrim or Elder Scrolls 6 out, right? They're going to need QA.
This year, apparently. That's what the
this year, this financial year.
Elder Scrolls fans seem convinced that it's coming out next year.
Next year. I was going to say put it out the same. Let's put it out, I don't know, maybe say November 18th. Maybe
Yeah. Sorry, Starfield came out 3 years ago, but we've definitely scaled up and built the whole game by then. I mean, so a lot of this has come out of a memo that was shared internally at Xbox, and then they published on Xbox Wire. And I think what really stands out to me is something that Asha Sharma, who's the new Xbox CEO, is she new now though? It's been 3 or 4 months, so I don't know when that label wears off.
I'd still call it my new job if I was there 3 or 4 months.
True. Yeah. But according to her, the margins that Xbox are running on are, and this is a wide data point, but are 3 to 10 times lower than the competitors. And they cited Game Pass and multi-platform releases as both things that did not achieve the growth they expected. Something that's not in here actually, which I saw this morning, was that Xbox and Microsoft had forecasted 70 million subscribers to Game Pass by 2026, and they're at 30. So clearly that bet failed.
Yeah, it's a sad thing. So I remember when they announced Game Pass, and I was like, yeah, if somebody was stepping into gaming now and didn't know what to buy, I'd probably recommend they just pick up an Xbox and Game Pass.
Yeah.
And that's somewhere along the path.
I do think it's still a good deal.
It's a great deal.
I think it's just
an amazing deal.
I don't want to be here being like, I said this would happen. I'm fairly sure though, if you go back into our...
I correct you, it's an amazing deal. It's an amazing deal while it's at that 20, while it's at a lower price point. When it went up, before they were strict Call of Duty,
amazing.
Not a great deal.
But I'm fairly sure, and I'm going to go check afterwards for the receipts, but I reckon in our company Slack, in our BGM Slack that we have, there's stuff from me in like 2022 disparaging Game Pass and saying, there's no way this is sustainable. I don't understand how Microsoft make any money from this. And lo and behold,
you were right. I
could have told you this 3 years ago, 4 years ago. But
Tom Stradamus.
Well, I don't want to be correct, but I just think I think it's one of the things you've said, Alex, and it's true, is that I don't think Xbox is doing this for the sake of it. I think they're clearly in a lot of trouble, and cutting so many roles seems drastic, but if in a year's time they're in a much better position where I'd hope they don't have to do this again, then I imagine everyone who's still working at those studios will be a lot happier. It's just not the news that you want to see.
Absolutely. It's awful. Partly for the people that are let go, it's obviously awful. But for people who are there for the rest of the year, it's awful because they know more cuts are coming. Like, those are the two sides of this. However, companies can't operate at a loss, and owned companies, traded companies, can't operate on a low profit margin. What I will say is that, and I alluded to this before, like they came out, they weren't hiding from how negative this was. They've been very upfront with what they're doing and what has to happen. They have tried to build off ramps for the studios they could build off ramps for. And I think
big credit.
Yeah, as much
for
as you
that.
can when you're letting go of a huge percentage of work. I know it's because Microsoft as a whole is doing it, and then the Xbox ones is needing larger percentage, and I can't remember both numbers. But it's a huge. But considering what they're doing, this is I'm not going to say the best, but a really good way of having handled it. It's a really good way of having.
What I'd ask is, do these cuts, and especially the way, to me, the studio divestments in particular, this feels like a bit of a damning of like judgment of, and I'm not just calling out one person here, but Phil Spencer let, and with a team of people, I'm sure. But the fact is, I think these cuts and how strong they are, and the amount of studios that they're pushing back out, to me, it kind of says, well, was this really aggressive acquisition policy flawed? Because I don't see what Xbox has really gained out of it at the moment. And because you look at most of these studios that they're pushing back out, and they've acquired all of these studios within the last couple of years. So was that a bit of a waste of time then? Because I don't really know what they've gained out of it. And it's just led to these really drastic cuts. And I think it's great that these studios have off ramps again to take off and become independent. Some are moving under new ownership, but they're probably in a much more unstable position than they were before they got acquired.
I just had a quick Google because I think this is important to the conversation here, because Phil Spencer made that gamble, or at least announced that gamble when it started back in 2017. And I think that's worth bearing in mind. This is nearly 9 years of trying to make Game Pass work. Now, there's an argument here where right at that point, Fortnite came out a few months later. Suddenly, everybody shifts to playing 1 or 2 games all the time, and the value of something like Game Pass, which kind of launched with an old school paradigm of people are going to jump between a lot of games, and maybe they play a lot of Call of Duty, but they also have other things, with the exception of FIFA and COD players. I don't mean to be dismissive of that, but there are different breeds in this. But then I think there are a lot of people
they're not proper gamers, are they?
But I think you then open a place. Games. Absolutely, the people who actually play them, unlike me, who just buys them and never plays them. It's not a great deal. I'm doing.
You don't even
have
the boxes now either. You can't even display them. You're just buying data on a console. Wow, look how good the logo looks on the home screen.
Not even downloading it. Memory's too expensive. But yeah, it feels like a gamble made at exactly the wrong time, because there was a paradigm shift, partly due to COVID, like changing the way people play games, but also with a lot of these live service games really stepping up and becoming the predominant way a lot of especially younger players play games. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like
you're saying that if Fortnite hadn't come out, Xbox would rule the world.
I'm saying Fortnite is perhaps the embodiment of the point I'm making, which is the way people play games changed right in the window they were making this gamble. And yes,
live service had been a thing for a while to that point, but not to. I don't think anyone had monetized it. Perhaps
not as effective. No, they certainly have, but not as effectively
as Epic.
And you look at what Asher Sharma's bringing directly under. I believe one of the things is Candy Crush, and
King. King is coming under.
And
shows
that's
priorities.
And that's why they bought Activision, because it had that live service and it had the COD that is kind of their solution to Fortnite. I'm talking very broadly. If this is taken out of context, I'm going to sound like a maniac.
You just wait to see what clips I clip you out and really screw you over. Yeah, basically, if Fortnite hadn't come out, then we'd all be owned by Xbox.
Yeah. But I just think it was a really bold decision that I think at the probably in the lead up to when it was being decided, probably made a lot of sense. And then the instant it was decided, stopped making as much sense.
But then they doubled down and kept buying studios. That's the issue.
There's a separate part to that, absolutely. But that's where the Activision Blizzard kind of decision came in. So I'm still really energized by the concept of the Netflix of games, as it was always called. I just think that yeah,
It's got a
I don't know.
ceiling,
It does.
and you'd like to think no one can possibly make the same mistake again, because if these things that are being reported that 70 million was the target by 2026 in terms of subscriber base, if that's true, that feels very like corporate. Well, things just keep growing. Think more people are born, more people play games, more people subscribe to Game Pass, and we're fine. And eventually it'll be 100 million, and then it'll be 150 million. And instead,
I mean,
if anything, they peaked, I believe, last year. And then once the price increase, which you spoke about, came in, they dropped from about 35 million down to 30. So they were halfway there last year. And if they'd had a really good year, they maybe could have got up to 70, but
and
they had
I'm
the
not
opposite.
gonna, I'm not gonna blame the cost. Well, I am gonna blame the cost of living crisis. That's exactly what we have to do. But you see, however much coming out of your account each month, and that's massively off-putting at the moment for a lot of people. The flip side of that would be, or not the flip side, but rather when they put that price up even more, the momentum of like, well, I just have Game Pass. It's like, well, now I just have Game Pass and it's a lot of money. Going back into making that subscription when you maybe you've come to the realization that a lot of the games you play aren't on it, or yeah, you're not going to get those 5 million back as easily as you'd hope. It's not a foregone conclusion.
Yeah. I think we'll end it there. Yeah, it's interesting because I know we've spoken quite positively about Xbox's communications in the past few months, and I think today even we've both given them credit for the way they've gone about this. They've not tried to backdoor it. They've been very upfront. I will give a lot of praise for divesting in these studios rather than just shutting them down or laying. There's so much talent in these studios. My biggest fear was that it was going to be another case of cut loads of staff, make them support studios, and we've seen that far too much. And that's something which does upset me, is when the great studios just end up being credits in a game because they helped develop something. So I'm grateful for that,
Yeah,
but
it does
still
sound a
sad
little bit
news.
more like they were trying to protect the games,
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
which
Obviously, the people in the studios as well, but it does feel a lot more like we want to. These are games we're excited about, but we're not going to be the ones making them. We're excited to play them, so we're going to
yeah,
try
so
and
we want to
make sure they get made.
help these teams out.
Yeah,
But anyway, shall we maybe run through a few,
a little quick
yeah, a few little quick
thinky
stories
do.
of a little rapid rundown of some of a few of the week's smaller stories that I think are interesting.
Yes, yes.
The first of these is that the original lineup of Switch consoles, so the Nintendo Switch, the Nintendo Switch Lite, and the Nintendo Switch OLED, are being discontinued next year in Europe, only because there's a new EU law which mandates that all electronics must have replaceable batteries, and Nintendo have presumably thought there's no point manufacturing new consoles when this thing is, and here's gonna make us all feel really old, 10 years old next year. So
Almost as old as as old as Game Pass
yeah, and one of them's, well,
and
Game Pass
Fortnite.
hasn't been
All coming.
discontinued yet. The Switch has had a successor of sorts. Well, maybe Game Pass 2 next year. Maybe Game Pass 2, Electric Boogaloo. But no, they'll continue to manufacture them in other parts of the world, so they'll still be
Yeah,
available. But I think 10 years is a hell of a run. I'm sure that Nintendo are happier that they're discontinuing a system after 10 years in Europe rather than what felt like 3 for the Wii
already.
U. I don't even know if they made any more after the initial batch, because I bought one and then looked around and there was no one else there to buy one. So I think it's,
Yeah,
again,
I
sad
mean,
to see. In a way, it feels like the ending of a chapter for what has been an amazing
I
system. But
really don't think. I think people will probably start importing and stuff. Like,
if they, I mean, there's so many
if
out
they're still
there
making
on the secondhand
exactly,
market.
and
Unless
that too.
Nintendo go digital only with the Switch going forward, and it's just it's a concept that you have to buy into. On
To point to the concept of the Switch.
yeah, you get it for a little bit and then we get it back. It's digital only.
Yeah, no, I think it makes absolute sense. There's rumors of a new Switch 2 coming that that meets these requirements of the removable battery as well.
Yeah, and obviously that
So
that makes total sense because they can sell that
yeah,
thing for 10 years. I think we've seen the
exactly.
Switch sales decline a lot. I still hope it has what it takes to beat the PS2. The fanboy in me is demanding that, although I'm sure that Sony will find a few spreadsheets should they need to with another 20,000 units sold for the PS2 to, or they'll re-release it like Avengers Endgame and Avatar have kept doing for the past 5 or 6 years to surpass each other. But the other story, and I think this is what you were thinking
Mhm.
you were going to talk about before, Alex, and I think this is a very optimistic story. I guess it shows that there is some care for the physical, history of video games too. The Video Game History Foundation has essentially called on the ESA to find a way for people to legally access digital only games for research to preserve these games from the perspective of someone who is a consumer, but also a historian in other ways, not necessarily video games. Totally makes sense. I just don't see the publishers and the people who own these games from allowing this to happen. But I don't know, have you got any thoughts? Because I know you picked this out.
Yeah, I thought it came at a really interesting moment. It was kind of like it shoehorned alongside we're scrapping digital and there's going to be no physical. It's like
But we've got to
I
find a
just
way to look after them.
yeah, like I don't even think I think it's not even just allow them to try is kind of all I kind of want off the back of this because obviously there's people that kind of block it for IP and ownership reasons. I'm just like it's nothing nefarious. But if these things are lost,
Well, it's preservation, isn't it? And the
exactly.
the reality is, whether people like it or not, these I am 100% sure that there is some people out there who have got all these games downloaded, locked away somewhere. They're just asking in this case, hey, we want to help you. We want to preserve this stuff, but we want to try and do it right. If you don't let us do it right, we're going to do it anyway, to,
I mean,
to quote Barry from EastEnders.
yeah,
And there's nothing you can really do to stop that, which is true.
can't remember. But there's all sorts of things of this throughout history. Like, well, throughout history, it's overselling it. But like,
When Alexander the Great was,
yeah, was playing his Wii U.
yeah, there's two. We found
There's kind
two.
of
He,
like
he
when
loved Zombie U famously.
yeah,
He
when
did.
the Okami Wii release came out, it had like an IGN watermark because they lost the original art for that, and they had to pull
Yeah,
it from that. Then
yeah.
you've got like I can't remember which Nintendo platform it was that was using a ROM that had been ripped from somewhere else because they couldn't find the
I think
original.
they've done that on Switch Online.
Yeah, and
So
I think I can't remember which Silent Hill it was, Konami or maybe some of the early ones lost the original code for PC, so it's just not out there on PC. So you can only run ROMs and like whatever. So having a body out there that is at least kind of tasked with not being corporate and thinking about money and being like, oh, it's easier if we just ignore it. We've lost movies and all sorts of this over time. It's not a unique
yeah,
issue
yeah,
to
we've lost
games.
games, haven't we? There'll
Exactly.
be.
But having a
I think
body
this
that tries
makes
to maintain it would be
yeah,
good.
it makes total sense. And there's very to me, I understand there's going to be legal hoops to jump through, but there needs to be a body that exists in the same way that libraries do for books. That, like you said, have got a game comes out. I don't care if it's the best game ever, or if it, if it's so bad it should never have been made. You've got to preserve these things. You've got to
Resisting
keep
giving
them.
opinions on either end of that scale.
But it doesn't matter what the games are. They need to be looked after, don't they? Because this is we love video games. This is culture. It's a sign of, if a game comes out 15 years ago, it's a sign of the era it comes out in, the politics of the era, the social landscape, the global events that are happening, and those things shape games, and it's really important to preserve that. And like I said before, the reality is if companies don't want to work on legal ways to do this, people are going to do it illegally anyway.
And I
If
don't understand
playing a
why they
ROM
wouldn't.
can possibly really be that, but
And they should be proud of it. Like they should embrace it. They should absolutely give like their blessing to it because ultimately it's a massive endorsement of what they created. I'm sure there are reasons why that isn't a great idea after them in some way, shape, or form legally with IP rights. But that's how I feel.
That's how I feel too. But then I have my own takes on jailbreaks and other such things as well. So I'm all for this because I think it makes total sense. But yeah, I think on that, I guess a positive note, we'll wrap here. Yeah, just a really big week. I am really intrigued to see where Sony go next, communication wise. I mean, they have every ability just to completely ignore the
Yeah,
backlash, and I kind of think they will. But it will be interesting if they do speak more on it. Maybe have a bit more of the transparency that we've seen with Xbox, and a little bit more of the
I
decision process behind it. Because I
think
think we
they
know
have
why they're doing it, and it makes
they have
sense.
far
But
less need to, though, don't they? I
I
was thinking
know,
about this when we
I
were
know.
because ultimately Xbox were impacting lives in terms of jobs and things, and into PlayStation just be like, this is happening.
Yeah.
It doesn't. I
I'll
mean,
be honest though, and this isn't me grandstanding on it because I don't, no one has to care what I think or do, but it's really put me off investing in whatever Sony do next.
hmm,
Like it really
okay,
has because, I've got enough games to play probably
well,
for the rest
yeah,
of my life at this point, and I think,
man,
is this
yeah.
something where I kind of want to put myself to something and say, yeah, I'm not investing in this. I already thought it was ridiculous that I had to buy a disc drive for the PS5 Pro. I think it's a nonsense that that was even a thing. But the idea of just saying, "Hey, we're not making physical games anymore," and I've said this, I'm like 90% digital on the PS5, so I know I'm part of the problem. But I think people deserve the right to choose how they engage with media. And I love Edge magazine. If he said to me, "Right, we're only doing the digital one now," I'd be like, well, "Okay, we'll cancel my subscription because I'm not there for that." But yeah, we're both hypocrites, aren't we? Because look at us with our digital libraries being like, well, outrageous that Sony would even follow the consumer trends and commit to this. But I don't know. We're just two people sharing our thoughts, aren't we? But if you've enjoyed listening to our thoughts, be sure to, if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to give us a like, leave your thoughts about this. Definitely comment what you think about both of these stories. Happy to hear any opinions, and yeah, be sure to subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on your favorite podcast platforms, also be sure to subscribe there. We make episodes every single week. We've had a few weeks in the past 3 or 4 where we've had a few technical issues and we've been off site, so we haven't been able to deliver episodes. But we've pretty much been on this since last October, and we've been very consistent at
Given we're at
delivering.
Develop next week, that might happen again.
It
But
might, or we
but
might
we'll
do
see.
a live episode from the beach
Live from the
huts.
show.
Yeah, we'll
Yes.
see. Bring the microphone down, and we'll talk about everything we've seen at
Hand
Develop.
around a little thing like this, like we're
Yeah, just
proper influence.
hello. What do you think about the news that Sony are teeny tiny microphone? Oh, I've just this outro is just going up completely all over the place, Alex.
When are we ending?
We'll end in a moment. If you're also
Okay.
interested in reading the weekly download, we have the weekly download newsletter that is available on LinkedIn. We also have the daily download newsletter, but big news on that is that we'll be moving that over to Substack, and that will also be becoming a weekly newsletter. So you'll have 3 different ways to engage with the biggest stories in the industry, and seeing our thoughts on them as people within the industry itself. But I think that's everything for today. So Alex, thank you as always for joining, for
Thank
sharing
you.
some great insights. It's always a pleasure.
It's always fun. Thank you for having me again, Tom.
No, you're very welcome. I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.